Here or what? No.
Let's go.
No, that light is annoying to me too.
Okay, the YouTube stream has started, so meeting started.
All right, well, welcome everyone to the June 18th, 2020 Planning and Zoning meeting. It's 1 o'clock in the afternoon. The first order of business today would be to review last meeting's minutes. I trust you've all had an opportunity to review those. Is there any discussion relative to that?
Charlie says he needs, you need him to speak up, Charlie?
It's really hard to hear Kim. It's almost like an echo in the background.
All right, Charlie, we're working on the minutes now. We'll give you a minute or two to review them and then to act on the minutes. All right, hearing no discussion,
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, any discussion?
Who is that, Pat?
Pat.
Hearing none, all those in favor signify your name and your vote. We'll start with Commissioner Bravender and work this way.
Yes, Dan.
Ken Felger, yes. Charlie?
Ralph, aye. Albert was aye.
Very well, passed. Thank you. Our first order of business today, our first item is Duinick?
Dunnick.
Dunnick.
Yep.
Dunnick Incorporated. Sean?
Yes, Mr. Chair, Planning Commission, this item was continued from the last hearing for a site inspection that was conducted. The main piece of information we got from since the last meeting was the township input. They approved of the request, but they're indicating that it should be a one-year CUP for the hot mix plant, quote, as a trial run, and then reevaluate conditions at any future CUP hearings. With that, I'll turn it over to the chair.
All right. Incidentally, Mr. Riley, did they mention anything about the extended hours, the nighttime hours, the township?
I'll have mute on mine. Okay. So, I guess you're taking here earlier.
Mr. Chair, Planning Commission, they did not formally respond on that element. I'm going to speculate. That was probably something they did not even necessarily discuss. Sort of an odd request without a project. Maybe the applicants can speak being at the meeting, but I'm going to assume they mainly talked about the duration of the CUP.
All right, thank you, Mr. Riley. Applicants, do you have anything further to add?
Could you give your names also when you speak?
Sure. My name is Jason Versteg. Represent Dunnick Incorporated, work as an engineer for them. Also have Joe Holthaus here, who's the landowner. And yeah, I could only add, relative to that item, it was discussed at the township meeting. There was some, obviously that would probably had some reservations, but ultimately, their recommendations are what they are, and they did not express reluctance, at least in their proposed conditions, to not allow that. So.
Okay, very well. Sean, are there anyone joining this remotely who would like to speak to this issue?
Mr. Chair, it's about impossible to hear the applicant. I really could not make all of it.
What you need to do, move it.
You could can move it forward.
You can grab that microphone and move it forward, please.
Sure.
That's YouTube.
Okay, if you could simply recap what you had told the board.
Sure, I can do that. I know the item was discussed. The item of the extended hours was discussed at the township meeting. And I think from, certain individuals, I maybe expressed a reluctance or just at least questioned. But ultimately, the recommendations from that board as a whole did not include recommendation for restrictions on those hours. And so their recommendation, I guess, is what it is and should stand as such. So.
Did you hear that, Charlie?
Mr. Chair, yeah, it was better. So is the applicant okay with the motion that the staff has presented right now? I guess that's my question.
If I may, if you would like me to respond to that as the applicant, I'm not sure that there's actually a motion on the floor, but
We have a suggested motion in the staff report. I can read
a
it.
suggested motion.
I can
okay.
read it if you would like.
So does that suggested motion include a 1 year or a 3 year time frame? I guess that would be the main
Mr.
question.
Chair, can I read the suggested motion?
Yes, you
into the
may.
record? Yes. To approve the placement of a temporary bituminous plant for the 2020 season in accord with the plan submitted and the description provided by the applicant on the record with the following conditions. Any operations outside the hours of 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. must be job specific and will require a separate conditional use permit. In parentheses, traffic flow considerations could be included by the commission as well as restricting weekend operations.
Yeah, I guess if I may respond to that. Couple things. First of all, the duration of intended operation is different than what we had requested. I assume that's in response to the township comments. If it's 1 year that you would want to restrict this to, so be it, and we'll have to come year after year. It is nice to be able to plan for, for future years or, projects that might be coming up in future years. And so that's why we do request, generally the, 3 year to 5 year. But that is up to you guys. If you would feel better about granting a 1 year permit, and then we would come back next year, we could do that as well. Just take up more of all of our time, which is fine. Relative to hours of operation, the request that we made was 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday through Saturday, with some flexibility to operate during nighttime hours for a limited time frame in order to comply with requirements of a specific road project. I believe that type of language was included in that proposed motion. However, we had asked for, with the consent of the zoning administrator, and I think the proposed motion actually said with an additional conditional use. So obviously the difference there is that if, there'd be a time frame issue there, and a process issue, so if it was just with the consent of the zoning administrator, we would call up Sean and say, hey, we've got this project that we would like to operate or the contract requirements require us to operate at nighttime, you know, and it's gonna last for 3 weeks. And, you know, could you grant us that flexibility, you know, and it would already have been basically approved by you. As the proposed conditions are written, I believe that would require us to come back before this board and request again those nighttime operations specific to a certain project. Now, the only difference is, at this point, we're requesting those hours of operation. We do not have a specific project in mind, though. So basically, if we came back, we would be asking for the same thing we're asking for now, but with a specific project attached to it. So, you know, I'm struggling a little bit with that, you know, just because sometimes you get a project and you need to start the project within a certain short time frame, and sometimes these conditions, you know, depending on when you apply, sometimes this process can take up to 2 to 3 months. And sometimes that's not enough time in the middle of the summer, so.
Sean, is it unprecedented that we would grant nighttime usage without a job specific? I don't believe we've ever done that, have we?
So, Mr. Chair, Planning Commission, the requirement of the mining standards are outside of those hours as defined as nighttime hauling, and it requires a conditional use permit, and the intent is for emergency purposes only. The Planning Commission is to determine what emergency reasons, and they're supposed to issue a conditional use permit. I can't administratively allow nighttime hauling. It needs to come by conditional use. Have you issued a conditional use, open-ended, without project, without dates, without hours? I'm unaware of any.
On another matter, on the township response, I noted that they were suggesting a trial basis for the asphalt plant.
Yeah, that's their word. I guess a year is a year. If the conditional.
That would be a trial.
Well, I know, but most of our hot mix plants are on a yearly basis. We have one, I think, going on 15, 20 years, and they've come back every year. Now, if an argument can be made next year, if you do limit it to 1 year, that based on this location and operations and input from the township, that they want to allow more,
Right.
that doesn't mean you can't consider it.
Right. Okay, is there any discussion coming from the board members?
I have some discussion I'd like to ask the applicant.
This is Scott Smallberg. Maybe a fairly basic question here, but if the applicant will indulge me. But without a project in mind, talking about now.
Uh-oh.
Can you repeat that last part, Pat?
Sure. I just want to better understand as we're evaluating, requests about extended hours and things like that. Without a job in mind around which for us to base our decision about whether there's some compelling need for that, it leaves me wondering. Just why is the request coming in now rather than waiting until you're nearer to landing a job so that we could address the conditions of the CUP with that knowledge in mind?
If I may address that? Yeah, I appreciate the question. It's a good question. And I kind of mentioned in my previous response too, just the time frame of, from when you are awarded a project to when you actually have to perform that project. And sometimes there is several months in between the time. I mean, there's, you know, it could be that you get a project in February and you don't have to perform that project until August, let's say. So there's 3-4 months. But sometimes what happens is you get a project in June and it's awarded in, let's say, late June, and you have to have the project completed by let's say August 15, you know, they'll have a completion date on it. And so it just doesn't, that type of scenario doesn't give enough time to go through a complete conditional use permit process. Beyond that issue as well, what we're seeing is in the industry, just because of increased traffic especially in, you know, in the metro, West Metro here, you know, we're not in the metro here, but we're close to I-94 West Metro suburbs. And this site could potentially service that type of market. So what we're seeing with the traffic levels is a push through MnDOT to do more nighttime operations, you know, when traffic isn't as bad. Now, personally, most of our work is done from here to the west, and so our company hasn't done a lot of nighttime work because we don't work much in the metro or from here to the east, really. But not to say that, you know, we wouldn't pursue a project that would have those type of requirements. And so we're, to a certain extent, we're planning for the potential if we were to see a contract or a project that was bid with those type of requirements. We're looking for the ability to actually bid on that work. You know, in a confident manner that we would be able to actually fulfill the requirements of that contract. So, you know, if you didn't actually want to allow by this conditional use permit, you know, if there would be some way of at least giving us some assurance that if we came back in, you know, that would be something that would be considered favorably by the board. I'm not sure how you would actually do that, but.
Yeah, I don't know that we could do that. Another rudimentary question, since I'm not a gravel or hot mix plant expert. Here we are at sort of mid-June. What you're saying makes perfect sense to me in terms of wanting to have the flexibility in the event that you are bidding a job that would require that sort of flexibility. Is in your business, I mean, with mid-June, the construction season is already upon us. It'll be over before we know it. The timing of the bid packages going out and responses being due and contracts being awarded. Can you offer an opinion about the likelihood of something like that coming down the pipe that you don't already know about for the 2020 season?
Yeah, I think the likelihood for the 2020 season is probably not real high at this point that we'd be bidding work of that nature, just because a lot of the work for 2020 has already been let. And again, the work that actually has nighttime requirements, you know, are a subset of the larger, you know, set of projects that we would bid. So it would be something that would be quite specialized. Personally, at this point, I don't know of any projects that would actually require that for the 2020 season, but certainly it's something that we would anticipate for future seasons, which is the this proposal was brought to you as a package. So, you know, we were looking at 3 years. So we weren't necessarily looking at just this year, but we were looking down the line and certainly could anticipate, if not in the 2020 season, certainly 21 and 22 seasons that you know, there would be the good potential for work that with that type of requirement. But if you're going to limit it to 1 year, then it's probably not as, you know, as big of an issue. But maybe Joe can talk to that too.
Yeah, I'm the landowner. Joe Holthouse, landowner. We started working on this back in February and in March. Then COVID came, everything got delayed. We didn't know if we were going to be able to get even an asphalt plant in there, so we thought we were going to be proactive on the thing and try to get the application done before we actually had the job, and not bid the job, get the job, and then find out, well, you're not going to let us do it now. But I guess the way it sounds here is we should get the jobs and then come before the board.
For the nighttime.
Mr. Chair.
Not overall.
I need
Commissioner Bravender.
Go ahead.
So, and I agree with you on the whole COVID thing. I think starting in the mid-season like this, I would be inclined to recommend permitting through 2021 season just because of what's happened in the spring of this year. Gravel or hot mix plants, all the ones that we do that I'm aware of, all the ones that I do that I'm aware of, they do have to be permitted every year. I don't see that I would change that. Just for your case, I would probably be consistent along that line. And night hauling, we've only dealt with state bids, I believe, right?
State Highway 25 and then the interstate.
And the interstate. And usually those are quite a ways out there before you have the opportunity to do that. Everybody else has to do the same thing. They have to come in and get a request for nighttime hauling. I don't know that we've denied any of them since I've been on this board because they've been job specific. Sean can't just openly say you can do something. It has to be a board decision. So I'm afraid I'd have to side with that as far as the nighttime hauling.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, go ahead, Charlie.
When Dan talks, he has to use his outside voice. We cannot hear at all. And then the other thing, I just want to make a point. It's very difficult to do these meetings remotely. So when somebody on the online that's remote does try to speak, I'm hoping that you would give them a little preference. It's really hard to get a word in on these meetings. So as a chair, you have to give a little bit of preference when somebody wants to get online.
Well, indeed, I agree with you, Commissioner Burrell. However, I recognized Commissioner Burrell and you butted in. So I am recognizing you guys out there. So, Commissioner Bravender, you're not keen on going outside of the 1 year mix, or are you suggesting in some manner that we allow the 2021 season to be included because of the current situation?
Yes, that's what I'm allowing. I would be tend to be allowing through the 2021 season because of the situation this last spring. So that would be my recommendation if I were to make a motion.
I would agree with your recommendation. How about your other board members? Any other comment? Charlie?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, thank you. I would not have a problem with extending the years that it goes out, but I do think though that if they had a job specific where it was going to be nighttime operation, I do think that has to come back to the board to redo the conditional use permit. Not that it's going to be totally out of line, we do it all the time, but I think the applicant, if they're putting in a bid for a job,
they can just say it's conditional on approval of the planning commission for the nighttime hauling, and I know Sean would get that on the board as quick as he could, but Mr. Chairman, before I go too far, do we have any public that wanted to input on this?
We had 2 emails come in, and that's all I'm aware of, Charlie.
Yes, Mr. Chair, nobody has signed in from the public for this meeting, and no new comments.
It's just that I do see a couple people online that, let's see here.
Yeah, so Rhonda's for another item, and I don't know if I see anybody else, Charlie? Do you see somebody else beyond Rhonda Pierce?
But isn't it customary that we ask if there's any public input?
Yes, it is. Would you like me to formally ask?
Charlie's smiling.
That's the way we used to do it.
All right. Anyone else remotely connected to this, would you care to make any comment? Okay, hearing none, we'll come back up to the board. Relative to that nighttime hauling, I think the applicants, as well as Sean and the board here, are all in agreement that if indeed nighttime hauling comes up, they do have to come back. I think the only slight change that Commissioner Bravender is suggesting is that we go allow these people, the applicants, to conduct their operations through the 2021 season.
Chair, I would have no problem with that. If Commissioner Bravender wants to make a motion, I would appreciate it.
All right, if there's no further discussion, Pat, do you have anything else to say? Well, hearing none, so Commissioner Bravender, if you're prepared.
I am somewhat reticent to disregard the township's request for the year. But I'll deal with that between now and the time that we vote.
Commissioner Bravender?
I do have a comment on that. If we're going to go on a yearly basis, that means that this would be good until 2021 of today's date, correct?
Mr. Chair, the motion is suggesting this season. If you want to say a year, then I think we're back to the same issue of why do that if they're going to have to come back in June? Why not just say the 2020 season?
My point exactly.
If you don't want them back in June, then I'd say through the 2021 season. The township has requested 1 year. I would suggest, since it is the middle of the summer, I would explain to them the planning commission's thought was it's essentially a half-season permit, and I would offer a condition of a township review after 1 year from this date, because if they thought it was going to be a year, they wouldn't have had the 1 year review. If it's going to be 2 seasons, give them a chance going into next season to indicate if they have any issues. It's not, it's standard, we do a 1 year township review.
Yeah, yeah.
Commissioner?
I'm prepared to make a motion.
Very well.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the placement of a temporary bituminous plant for the 2020 and 2021 season, and in accord with the plans submitted and the description provided by the applicant on record with the following condition. Any operations outside the hours of 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. must be job-specific and will require a separate conditional use permit. And also that the township do their own review of the operation by June 18th of 2021 and submit it to the Planning Commission.
I would second that.
I will second it, Commissioner Grell, if you did already.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chair, just want to make sure.
Yeah, this is Commissioner Mulberg. Commissioner Bravender, a question I have, what's the point of the township's review? If we're extending a CUP that authorizes it through the end of the 21 season, isn't the township reviewing it in the middle of the 21 season a somewhat, one of my favorite words, a somewhat nugatory event?
Oh, Commissioner Malberg, the reasoning for that from my standpoint, being on a township board, would be that if there are issues with the current operation, the township can respond to the county, because as you well know, CUPs can be revoked if they're violations of it. So that was my only reasoning behind that. As far as reviewal, other than that, if we wanted to put one at the end of the 2021 season also, that'd be fine.
That's fine, Commissioner Bravender. I just wanted to hear the reasoning on it. I would sure hope that if the township is having issues, that regardless of whether we put in something that says we can review it in a year, that they'll be in communication with Conic on a more real-time basis than holding any problems until June. Problems or congratulations, who knows?
Thank you.
All right, any further discussion?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I'm just wanting to make sure traffic flow and weekend operations are not something that Planning Commission wants to deal with. Perhaps a site inspection answered any concerns about traffic flow or Saturday. The pit itself does not have a restriction on Saturdays.
Well, it's not included in the motion. So in any event, no further discussion. All those in favor of the proposal, we'll start with Commissioner Bravender's end of the board.
Bravender votes yes.
Felger votes yes.
Brown votes yes. Mulberg votes yes.
Very well, thank you.
Thank you.
Best wishes to you, gentlemen.
You pause.
All right, our next agenda item is Michael S. Livermore. Sean?
Yes, Mr. Chair, Planning Commission, this item was continued for a site inspection. I sent out the final staff report for this continuation. Make sure you got that in your email, and I noted the sections in red under action speaking to the new site plan that was submitted with some of the stormwater drawings and some staff input. Turn that over to you, Ken. I mean, it's not on here, right?
Very well, thank you, Mr. Riley. Do the applicants have any items to add to the information here today? And if you could please state your name to the secretary.
Yeah, Michael Livermore, and I'm the, my wife and I are the ones that are trying to acquire this lot. And when we were here last time, obviously the site inspection was recommended. So based on that, we had hired an engineer to take a look, to attend the site inspection as well as completing some work for us on a drainage plan to address some of the issues that came up last time. Mike, I don't know if you... So our hope today is to move through this process, and we've got a couple variances, at least one variance that we'd be looking at through the variance process. So this is kind of step one for us going through that.
Okay, very. Sir, did you have anything to add?
Not much, other than I think the site visit was very valuable, that we could see what the neighborhood patterns of drainage were. We could see all the lots.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner, the petitioner is speaking. Can you not hear him?
we are not hearing, it's just like mutter.
All right.
We're not hearing.
So
Put it back a little bit.
Guys, that one's for the YouTube. Nobody's watching. I am. Barry's watching.
Well, that's important.
Right, well, it is, but, so this one, so if you can just look at that, it's Charlie's outside voice.
Okay.
To that one.
This isn't drainage.
So neither one of these are functioning?
They serve
Well,
different
they're both
Serve
functioning.
a different purpose.
Okay.
Okay.
So if the architect could give your name first of all when you speak, and then,
I'm sorry. Commissioner Burrell, did you hear Mr. Livermore's statements?
No, Mr. Chair, that's why I was rude. I was rude and interrupted because we could not hear.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Just stand up there.
you could,
Okay.
yes.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Very good now.
Okay. Michael Livermore and my wife and I are the couple trying to acquire this property. And when we were here for the last hearing, it was suggested that a site visit be conducted to take a look at the drainage and so forth, because we are looking at adding some fill to the lot, but also trying to be sensitive of the drainage plan as well. So site plan was completed. We, as a result of that site plan, we did have an engineer attend that session and also did some work for us on designing a drainage system on the lot itself to help with the drainage and avoid some of the concerns on one of the property owners next door. But I'll turn it over to Mike Sherratt, our architect, and I believe our engineer is on the phone as well.
Okay. Mike Sherratt, I'm an architect. My office is in Excelsior, 464 2nd Street. I thought that I started to comment that I thought that the site visit was very valuable, that we were all there experiencing the same visibility and discussing where the drainage within the area is, not only on this lot, but within the area. relative to drainage off the road. There was a drainage ditch at the front of the lot next to the road that is slowly heading westward. We couldn't determine an outflow for that when we were out there. But given that, and given the natural aspect of all three sites, including the ones on either side of this lot, are relatively flat. They all have their own issues relative to septic mound systems, and to the east there's a depression that I'm sure when there's a big rain on the other on that lot, that this drainage ditch kind of flows through that depression and probably gathers water. We talked about all those things, and with the civil engineer that was at the site after our visit, she took some of the discussion that we all had out there and integrated that into the site plan that we had initially provided, and also posted a letter saying that that this, from what she believes the calculations will be when it gets into a true engineering analysis, would be satisfactory to a city engineer review and approval. So we're here for any questions that you might have.
Very well, thank you, gentlemen. Is there anyone from the public listening in that would care to make any comments? I know we have received some written correspondence. I think that was received prior to last meeting, and I'm of the belief that a lot of that concern has been addressed. Is there anyone from the public? Okay, seeing none, let's bring her back up to the board. Anyone have comments?
Mr. Chair, can I ask one question for clarification?
Yes, Mr. Riley.
This is probably more for the engineer. I have a cover letter and I have the site plan that's being on the PowerPoint. Do you have calculations, any engineering work, any information behind this design that we just have not seen yet?
This is Rhonda Pierce with Pierce Peening Associates on the phone, and I'm the civil engineer working on it. We have not done calculations and stormwater modeling on this yet. What you're looking at is the intent of the site and where the drainage areas are proposed to be, but we haven't done any engineering design and calculations yet. We're trying to do this in small pieces just to not spend so much money.
Right. You would agree, though, assuming all approvals are granted, that a final document or an as-built, so somebody can build this site plan, calculations and engineering would be needed.
Yes, the site is pretty flat from north to south, and then we will have a full grading plan that will have spot elevations and drainage arrows and show the swales and what those look like, just so it's very particular to make sure that stormwater runoff from the roof, from the site, stays on this property, that any runoff from the adjacent properties that are flowing through this are maintained and flow and don't adversely affect this house either. So, no, this is going to require full design drawings for a contractor to be able to build from, and we'll do that.
So our only concern at the staff level is when we don't have that pre-approval. If something doesn't work out or can't be designed or fit, that just leaves everybody in a tough position.
But could you not make it contingent upon your city engineer's approval of the calculation?
So that's a given, but if that contingency is not met, having an approval for a CUP and a decision already made without coming back saying, well, how about we modify or do this or this or this, then you're starting over.
Well,
Potentially.
there's a potential. I would guess, Rhonda, you should speak to that based on your past extensive experience working with you on several other jobs and all the other work that you do, is this something that you have any concept that it would not calculate and satisfy a city engineer's review?
No, there's nothing on this that makes me pause and think that we would be unable to follow this intent. No, if that was the case, we would have spoke up 2 weeks ago and said, whoa, there's something funky here. No, we don't have that. It's a small site, it's a tight site, but we can make the drainage intent work that you see sketched in front of you.
Mr. Chair?
Commissioner.
I guess I would like to follow up with Rhonda's statement right there. So looking at the map and some of the design things, I remember the testimony from one of the neighbors at our last meeting, and they said that there's already kind of a drainage problem already in a heavy rain where it backs up onto their property. Is this something that could potentially we could do to make kind of the swale maybe a little bit deeper even to help the drainage, so that it might actually in effect help the neighbor? Is that something that's feasible?
I would have to understand a little bit more where they're seeing their drainage problem. There is a tree, so if the drainage problem is along the ditch, along 14th Avenue, this project isn't necessarily going to improve that drainage ditch. It's a pretty shallow slope that Mike mentioned. On site you can see it visually standing a few houses over, that it is flowing to the west, but it is pretty shallow. So if they're seeing some ponding near their driveway, there's a tree that we are trying to save that's by the shed and by the septic mound. That might be hard to get that water moved around and towards the lake. Trying to slope a swale all the way from the street to the lake, there's only a couple of feet of grade change. So it's something we can look at to see, but I'm not sure where they're seeing their drainage problem. So if we knew that, then possibly we might be able to help alleviate that with some grading. But we'd have to know what that is.
Then just to follow up, I appreciate that answer. Would it be something that could be looked at as maybe an underground tile, a non-perforated tile that would have kind of a drainage could help out there? Because you're already going to be doing quite a bit of excavating on the property. I would think that would be something that would be a good time to put in right now before you plant your grass.
It might be, yes. If we put in some landscape drains, some perforated pipe in areas that are ponding, and then hard pipe that, like you said, non-perforated, and it could connect into a different drainage system and then daylight towards the lake, that could be possible. Yep.
I would recommend that. I think that I farm, and I know how nice it is to be able to do it, and now the opportunity is now. It wouldn't be later, obviously.
It'd have to be something that Mike's property, Mike Livermore and his wife, their property, and the adjacent homeowner discussed, because if they're taking their water from the neighbors and handling it through their site, they just want to make sure that they are okay with that.
Rhonda, this is Ken, the Vice Chair. I have a question for you. I understand that this is a platted lot, is that correct?
Well, pardon me, I didn't hear that.
Rhonda, is this lot platted? As opposed to unplatted?
I can't answer that.
It is platted.
Okay, we've made a determination that it's platted. Now, I'm curious as though when they made the plat, if they dedicated drainage and utility easements along the lot lines, which may,
I can't answer that. We have the survey here that's sketches on top of. They're not indicating utility easements along the side lots, but I can't answer that.
okay, very well, thank you.
Otherwise-
Well, it appears as though staff is concerned, and I'm sure the board is concerned as well, about providing a CUP without all the documentation. That's not necessarily the way we operate. It sounds as though you need more engineering plans. It sounds as though you may need to go to the Board of Adjustment, which you have not done yet. Is that correct, sir?
We have not, and we wanted to get through this step first, and obviously go through the Board of Adjustment for the second.
Sure. But you can understand our concern is that, okay, if these things aren't fulfilled and you've already got the CUP, that puts staff in a somewhat difficult position in terms of issuing a building permit perhaps. So I think.
But if you make it contingent upon the approval of the city engineer, that will be provided. The issue is, and I face this all the time, is that we're at a very early stage of finding out, can we even build on the site anything? The issue is that potential owner, they still don't even own the site yet. Are they going to, how much money and energy are they going to put forward before they have some idea whether it's feasible? If we went through all the engineering, I don't know what the civil engineering fees would be to do all the calculations and provide the design plan. But is there then a potential for that project even then not to be approved? So how much do you do ahead of time? And we're here to listen to what you have to say, and if you say it's necessary, it's necessary. They have to close on the plot or not tomorrow. That was disclosed in the previous meeting. But we make a commitment that this will meet engineering standards and meet the city engineer's approval. And if that does not happen, the CUP evaporates. Why can't we do that?
About the platted or the?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Barry Ramberger, I'm one of the staff planners.
Yes.
I did look, I heard the question you had asked about the drainage and utility easements. So I pulled up the plat document, which is from 1967. The only easement is a 10-foot drainage and utility easement on the north end of the lot, right next to the road right-of-way, but nothing in between the lots.
Okay. Thank you, Barry.
Thanks, Barry. Mr. Chair,
Mr. Riley.
one more comment about the procedure. It will need a Board of Adjustment hearing, for a provision on the septic system, and I'm going to assume about this 15-foot fill perimeter requirement around the house that's required. I cannot guarantee or speak for the Board of Adjustment. I'm going to say there's a good chance the Board of Adjustment, once hearing about needing a variance to the 15-foot requirement, they may require the full design of engineering.
Right.
Well,
That would be more logical. That would be the later thing to be approved.
I mean, if it would, I'm not going to speak to the logic or non-logic. I'm just saying we are not necessarily set up like a city where we have an engineering department and you get approval to build a 3-unit strip mall, and then you have to prove you meet all codes. This one is more, this is approval at our public hearings. Of course, you'll have a building permit, but in most instances, the decision-making bodies don't like to kick it down the road and hope that all the professional information supports their decisions. We're hearing today from the engineer, in her professional opinion, she thinks she's going to be able to make it work, both from an initial review and going on site. So the planning commission needs to decide if they're going to make that a condition. But I can't guarantee the Board of Adjustment will see it similar.
Mr. Livermore.
Yes, completely understand the situation with the Board of Adjustment, and again, our goal was to try to get some commitment through this hearing today, and then at that point, we can decide to invest in the additional engineering report for that follow-up hearing. So that was my thought. But we just, if we didn't want to keep walking away from this hearing knowing that we'd have to invest a huge amount without having some reassurance at that point, especially closing on the lot tomorrow, if we decide to proceed that way.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Bravender.
I guess I want to address the water part of the drainage here. We were out there at the site and visited it, and a couple of us walked all the way up to the east, I believe it was, because that's where the drainage starts, coming from the east side of this property quite a ways up. I'm guessing that the neighbor with the water problem, that it's incorporated in that water flow from the east, not into the actual lot property where the buildings are going to be built. Just looking at the area, you following me, Charlie and Pat?
I just sent you a text, Dan. I said, use your outside voice.
Don't worry about it. You said that.
I quit yelling at my kids 30 years ago.
Because we're sharing.
Don't you, grandchildren?
So, Charlie, when we were out visiting the site, a lot of the water drainage problems were out by the road, out by 14th Street. And the way that water flows down through that shallow ditch, and I can see where that would flow onto the neighbor's property because it's a natural pathway, because part of that water flow goes underneath their driveway via a culvert. Does that make sense?
Right, not that, yeah.
Okay. This property here, the elevation that they're required to be at with the soil when they're done is not going to be above the properties next to them. So it's not going to create any watershed necessarily from the land. From the buildings is the only watershed, extra watershed that you may be looking at. Does that make sense?
Right, and then there's no reason why they couldn't put, the gutters on the house and get that water and make sure that that's all taken away.
Yep.
So it's not making any kind of impediment to the neighbors, so.
And personally, I didn't have a problem with that, the way the property was going to be developed, because it wasn't elevating it above anything. And I've seen this in our township quite often, where people want to add a little more land and then get above the water and create all the problems on their neighbors. And it seems to me they're doing the best job they can to make sure that doesn't happen.
Okay. Then, Dan, are you prepared to make a motion on this? Because I do think that this does look like a good plan, and I say the township approves, but we don't have a staff recommendation for a motion at this time.
Mr. Kreiser, are you still on? Mr. Kreiser?
I am. Got to find my mute button, but I'm here.
Okay, very well. Mr. Kreiser, there's been some discussion about granting a contingent CUP. What is your opinion on that notion?
I always like finality and certainty in these things. I don't like contingencies. And I was going to interject because I heard the engineer make a comment about wanting some assurances prior to the closing, and I just want the record to reflect here clearly that the board does not give out any sort of promises or anything that when it's making its decisions. It makes its decision at the end when it makes the motion and it's approved, but we don't make any guarantees or any promises to anyone in these proceedings.
Thank you. Well, given the situation, is there any further comment from the board members?
I'm prepared to make a motion, Mr. Chair.
Very well, Mr. Bravender.
I'd like to make a motion that we act and approve the CUP with the site plan showing stormwater controls without formal design for calculations at this time. And if this is granted, that the condition of this work being done for building permits and/or the Board of Adjustment will be needed. Does that sound right?
You'd probably take out if approved, because you're making a
Okay.
motion to approve, but
I'm trying to read between
yes,
the lines here.
well, that's what, a condition of formal engineering and calculations supporting the site plan will be needed for building permit and/or Board of Adjustment.
What you just said.
Okay? And then the last sentence
For the Board of Adjustment?
for a suggested motion. Other conditions.
Oh, I see. Other conditions would be constructing per site plan, installing proper erosion controls, and soil and water review technical information.
All right, Mr. Bravender, would you care to repeat the whole thing or not? So we're all clear. And, yeah, go ahead.
You want me to repeat what I heard?
Yeah, repeat that,
Dan?
Sean, would you? Took the words right out of my mouth.
Commission Bravender proposed granting the conditional use permit to move in excess of 50 cubic yards in shoreland and floodplain districts with the condition that formal civil engineering designs and calculations must be submitted supporting the site plan for building permits and/or the Board of Adjustment process. Condition 2, constructing per submitted site plan. Condition 3, installing proper erosion controls. And condition 4, soil and water review technical information.
All right, has everyone hearing remotely or listening remotely, did you hear the motion? Charlie?
Mr. Chair, I'll second that motion.
Apparently you did. All right. Okay, there's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay, hearing none, the chair would like to ask or to inform the applicants that, for the record, if this thing is not approved by other agencies or whomever you have to go through, that COP is no longer in effect. That makes sense, Sean?
You need to meet the conditions.
You have to meet the conditions to get full benefit of this CUP.
We understand. I understand.
For the record.
Yes.
Okay. Hearing no further discussion, let's start our vote with Commissioner Malmberg. Malmberg.
Commissioner Malberg votes yes. Commissioner Malberg votes yes.
Thank you. You're next, Charlie.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Charlie?
Charlie next.
I was waiting for my name. Commissioner Burrell votes aye.
Felger votes aye.
Bravender votes aye.
Very well, motion passes. Best
Thank you very
wishes,
much.
gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
We're up? Oh, okay. Well, good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you.
Sean, we'll lead
Yes.
off with you. We're talking with Mr. John Hovland.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, for the applicant, you want to speak directly at that and loud. You might even want to just, I know you're settled in, but you might want to slide over closer to that one,
This or to that one?
to that one.
Okay.
Yep.
That little,
We have
Want me
a,
to speak now or?
no, just, Mr. Chair, Planning Commission, the property is zoned agriculture. It's in the land use plan as agriculture. It's a 10-acre entitlement division. They own the surrounding farm in addition. The request is for a commercial outdoor recreation conditional use permit on the 10 acres. Staff report describes what the applicant presented for information. We We normally do a site inspection for these new commercial outdoor recreation facilities. Staff is recommending that. I will turn it over to the chair to discuss with the applicant.
Very well. Mr. Hovland, what would you like to add for our benefit, please? There, please.
Thank you. John Hovland. So we're new to the area. We just bought the farm last fall. It's actually 75 acres, 10 acres, and then
Just that, Mike. Yep, right there.
right here.
Yeah. Sorry.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
That's quite all right. It's 75 acres, and we've always wanted to do something for the public and for ourselves in some kind of a farm venue. So we have 5 children. We've homeschooled our kids, and we've done everything from apples to bees to, as we've read in the things that we put in there. We just planted 350 vines for grapes, so we have a really pretty vineyard going, which was an enormous amount of work, but fun. It'll be fun to watch them go. So, and what we're hoping to do is to allow the public to come on the property with us and enjoy different things. So and there's a process for safety of our public and restrooms and things like that we've been learning. So that's what I'm here to ask, if we can do events on our property.
Okay, very well. Now, Mr. Riley, this would fall under what ordinance number?
Commercial outdoor recreation.
Okay, very well. All right. Okay, are there any questions from the board? And then I'll go to any remote folks listening. Any questions from the Board of Commissioners, Planning and Zoning Commissioners? Hearing none?
Mr. Chair, this is Clinton.
All right, Charlie.
If you could go back to that map, the township I see has requested that traffic would come in from the north end of Gable Avenue to Fair Hill Drive southeast, so traffic is not traveling from the west on Fair Hill Drive. Could you point that out, or Sean, point that out to me?
They are requesting
33.
traffic come off County Road 33, down this township road, and then west on Fair Hill, because the property is right off that township road.
Okay.
Fair Hill's kind of a long,
So signage and directions to the property, that's what they would give out. I mean, if somebody lived just south of there, they're not going to go on that. They would not follow that route. But what the township then is requesting basically is that directions to the property be given as that direction.
yeah, I think they're trying to avoid coming up Fair Hill from the west as much as possible. It's a long meandering township road. Most people would probably avoid it anyhow.
Got it, thank you.
Mr. Malberg, any comments?
Oh.
All right. Anyone remotely listening have any comments from the public? All right, hearing none. What would the board like to do? Generally, in cases, we do have a site inspection. I don't know if that's up to the board's liking or not. I will take suggestions, yes or no, on a site visit.
I add something?
Okay, what do we do? What do we do, board?
Mr. Chair, I'd recommend a site visit on this. We've done it on all the other ones. And I think that'd be a good thing to do.
All right, I don't know if everyone heard, but Commissioner Bravender suggests a site inspection. And we can perhaps set that, if that's amenable to the board, we'll set that date right now.
Are you hearing us, Charlie and Pat?
Mr. Chair, if Commissioner Bravender was making a motion for a site inspection, I'll second that.
Very well. All right, any discussion? Those in favor of a site inspection indicate your name and vote, starting with Commissioner Bravender.
Bravender votes aye.
Felger votes aye.
Bell votes aye.
We're continuing it to what date?
It'd be continued to,
Wahlberg votes aye.
July 9th
9th,
would
is
be
that
the
what it
next
is?
meeting.
July 9th.
Incidentally, board members, the site in, or the continuance would be part of the motion to July 9th.
I'm okay with that, Mr. Chair.
All right. Hearing no further discussion. All those in favor signify your vote. Name first. Dan?
Bravender votes aye.
Felger votes aye.
Brooke votes aye.
Your turn, Pat.
Wahlberg votes yes.
All right, very well. Thank you. All right. Sir, what that means is that various board members, if not all of us, will meet at the site. You can explain what you've got going, we can look it over, and it's a matter of routine for the most
Yeah.
part.
I like it.
So,
When would that be?
well, we'll set that right now if we can, and I think we should set that now. Any suggestions, board members? Keeping in mind the next meeting is July 9th, obviously before that.
Mr. Chair, I'm free on the 4th. There's no celebration down in Delano.
I'm not free, that's a day off. How about June 26th on Friday afternoon?
Yeah, I don't know if Dan Moll could make.
The 26th,
Afternoon?
Well, it would.
how late in the afternoon would it be? I have a appointment at 1 o'clock.
Dan's on the Board of Adjustment, which is in the morning, so
Well, he could just stay here then.
he could just dedicate his whole day to us, huh? I
Did you
don't,
say the Thursday or Friday?
Friday.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thursday work?
I'm okay. I'm okay on Friday. I thought you said the 25th.
I don't want to do it Friday.
So it'd be Friday the 26th. Right? Correct?
How about the 23rd?
June 23rd, what time?
Commissioner Felger.
Yes. Pat, when are you open? When are you open, Pat?
We're not talking about it.
I didn't hear.
What do you say?
can't repeat it.
What do you say, June 23rd?
That's a Tuesday, right?
Yep.
Does June 23rd work, Pat?
What are we talking about? 23rd, I could do anytime between 10:15 and 3 o'clock.
Okay.
1 o'clock?
Do it in the morning.
I can't do it in the morning.
This is Commissioner Brow. If it's the 23rd, we have board meeting at 9 o'clock. I have a ditch meeting at 10:30 that I'm guessing will take us till probably 1 o'clock. So it would have to be sometime after 1 o'clock for me.
30?
Okay, how about 1:30, June 23rd?
Sounds good.
You can meet at the courthouse and drive out, or drive directly to the site. We will not be all riding in a van. You will drive separately. Meet at the site, 1:45.
What, you're meeting here at 1?
1:30 here,
1:30.
1:45 at the site.
Thank you. Ken knows Rockford.
Sound good? To repeat, June 23rd, 1:30 at the courthouse, 1:45 at the site. That's a Tuesday.
Next Tuesday.
Next Tuesday?
That gives us
man.
just enough time, yeah.
Okay, very well. There we go. Is there any other business to come before the board? Hearing none? Is there a motion for adjournment?
Okay.
He did.
Okay, very well. Thank you. Goodbye, everyone. Thank you so much.
Are we done?
We're done.